Hi guys, welcome to Be Inspired Live. I am Christy Pennison, licensed professional counselor, and I'm joined today with Sharlette, who is one of our counseling interns over here at Be Inspired Counseling and Consulting. And
Hi.
so I don't know about y'all, but have you ever been in a relationship where the way that you interact with somebody is way different than they're interacting with you? Maybe they shut down on you during a conflict, or maybe they don't give you any space when you're really worried about something and you just need a little space to think and breathe. Well, today we're going to talk about attachment styles and relationships because you may not know this, but you probably have an attachment style. And it probably affects the way that you engage in your relationships.
Right.
So, Charlene is going to join me today and she's going to tell us all about it, how it affects relationships. And so, if you're in a relationship, then this live is for you. All right, Charlene. So, tell me a little bit, what is attachment styles, anyways? What is that?
All right. So, hi, everybody. So, attachment styles. And Christy mentioned something where she said she's pretty sure that everybody has an attachment style. And that is definitely true. Everyone has an attachment style. So, attachment styles refer to the way that a person relates to other people. And like I said, everyone has an attachment style that was formed during childhood. And so this attachment style is basically based on a person's early relationship with their parents and how sensitive their parents were to responding to their needs. And the relationship between a child and their parents when they were growing up, it greatly impacts their emotional health, their social health, and their development in those relationships, and how it carries into adulthood. And so, what happens is how they related to their parents growing up, then it affects their feelings, how they develop their thoughts and their expectations of people in their adult relationships.
Yeah, and I guess we don't always think. I mean, people always do think, okay, my childhood impacted me in some kind of way, right? But we
Right.
also don't always think about the fact that we learn how to interact with other people based off of how we were first interacted and engaged with, right? Like, so how we receive, whether it be received love, attached to a caregiver, like that actually is the first that's the first way that we're learning how to attach and
Yeah,
how to engage with people in the world around us, right? So,
exactly.
all
Exactly.
right. Well, I know we're gonna like look at a brief thing about just what are the different. So let me get that pulled up about the different attachment styles.
Hmm.
So that way we can kind of go over what they are, and then hopefully that can also give some as a start to our conversation as we talk about the different attachment styles. And I guess we need to probably say really quickly that um, awareness of your attachment style is going to go a long way in
Right.
helping you understand how to engage with people. But let me just share this real quick and we'll kind of go from there. So,
Right.
here are some of the different types of attachment styles. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about them, Charlita? What are the different ones? And
Okay. So the different types of attachment styles, as you can see there on the graphic, there are four types of attachment styles. And as I'm talking about them throughout the video or throughout this Q&A, you can kind of pick up on what your particular attachment style may be. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a secure attachment style, and that is low anxiety and low avoidance in, sorry. Yeah, low avoidance.
avoidance, that's right. Yeah, it's really small up in there, but let us tell you what it is.
So, low anxiety, low avoidance in relationships. We're going to talk about the avoidant attachment style, and that is low anxiety and high avoidance in relationships. We're going to talk about at the bottom the anxious attachment style, and that is high anxiety and low avoidance in relationships. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is fearful avoidant, or you may hear it called anxious avoidant, and that is high anxiety and high avoidance in relationships. And so The four types of attachment styles. The first one that we're going to talk about is the secure attachment style. And so, as we talk about this, we're going to just basically talk about how a secure attachment style is formed in childhood and what that relationship look like between a parent and a child. So, with the secure attachment style, that is characterized by a healthy relationship between a child and their parents. And so, in this type of attachment relationship or attachment style, the parents were consistent, they were attentive, they were responsive to the child's needs. And so, because of that, because of how attentive and responsive that parent or the parents were, then that child feels validated, they feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard. And that's where that secure attachment style is formed.
Yeah, and I guess this is the if we start off with attachment styles, we're gonna like go down the list, right? And I would say that this is the one that we all would love to have, right?
Right.
Secure, right? Because really, out of all the attachment styles, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the healthiest
Yeah.
type of attachment style,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I do want to point something out is that if this is not the type, if we're like Charlene is telling you these things and you're like, that was not my childhood. We'll get to some other ones, but I think what's important to point out here is that, you know, we don't choose how we come into the world, right? Like
Yeah.
we just come in and we get dropped down into some type of family system, and every family system is very different, it's very unique, and it's comprised of humans which have different experiences and backgrounds, and so as we're talking about this, it's important to understand sometimes we can get into a mentality of like, man, I wish my parents would have given me some secure attachment, right? I wish they would have validated me or been consistent with me and been attentive to my needs and responsive to me and made me feel safe and seen, right? And I think it's something that we all could say, yes, ideally we'd want that. But the reality is, life is hard, there's challenges, there's a lot of things that sometimes our parents did not know, or whatever family system that you were a part of, they just didn't know. And so I love how EJ, one of the therapists at our offices, always says, she's like, when we know better, we do better. And so right now we're learning so that hopefully we can do better. So tell us about, I know there's another one. So that's secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I also want to add before we go to the next one, something that you just mentioned there about, okay, man, I wish that my family would have been different and I had this secure attachment style. And people may think, well, as you're listening to this, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. It just shows you how you become more self-aware and maybe some areas that you can work on. So I just wanted to add that little point in there.
That's a great point. That's a great point. There's nothing wrong with you. If you didn't have a secure attachment style, it just, the more you understand your attachment style, the better you can be aware of things, of how to make your relationships better, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so we just talked about secure attachment style. Now we're going to talk about anxious attachment style. And in the anxious attachment style, how that's characterized is the parents were inconsistent and unpredictable. And so what that means is that sometimes the parents may have been nurturing and they may have appropriately responded to the child's needs, but then there may be other times where the parents were negligent and insensitive. And so because there's always like this up and down, like inconsistency, unpredictable relationship with your parents, then the child becomes confused and insecure, and they don't really know what type of treatment to expect from their parents. And so because of that type of attachment to their parents, then the child often feels suspicious and distrustful of their parents, but at the same time, they may act clingy and desperate as well. And the next one is the avoidant attachment style. And these that we're talking about, so we talked about secure first, and the last three that we're talking about are considered insecure attachment styles. And so this next one of the insecure one is going to be the avoidant attachment style. And the parents in this type of attachment style, they may have been strict, they probably were emotionally distant, or in some cases, the parent was completely absent. And so, because of that, the child became used to their needs going unmet. So they're just like, I'm used to not being seen. I'm used to not being heard. And they're used to their emotional needs being essentially ignored or diminished. And so the child in this type of relationship, parent-child relationship, they develop a strong sense of independence. Like, okay, I just have to fend for myself. And that's essentially because they realize their parents aren't reliable in caring for their emotional needs. And what happens is they tend to just avoid that closeness because their needs aren't going to get met anyway, right?
Yeah.
And the last one is anxious avoidant, or in the slide that we looked at earlier, it was called fearful avoidant. And you'll see different names used interchangeably. But the fearful avoidant or anxious avoidant. So in this type of attachment style, the parents were aggressive or threatening, or sometimes even abusive. And that could be physically abusive, verbally abusive, sexually abusive, mentally abusive. And so what happens is, where in an ideal relationship, the parent is supposed to be the place of safety, supposed to be the place of security. The child then doesn't see their parents as that place of safety, but they see them as a place of fear, a source of fear. And so that causes kind of like a combination of anxious and avoidant. There's the anxious avoidant attachment style.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of like these different attachment styles, secure, anxious, avoidant, anxious, or fearful avoidant, then let's talk about as adults then, how does these attachment styles sometimes impact our relationships, and why is it important to know which attachment style you feel like this is how I learned to attach by reflecting on my childhood experience? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, okay, as a child, you have these interactions with your parents. And something that you mentioned earlier was like, okay, well, how does my parents' relationship, my relationship with them, how does that impact me? It definitely is like your first idea of what relationships are supposed to look like, right? Mm-hmm. And so in those child relationships, that's where you explore intimacy, you explore, your emotions, your feelings. So from childhood to adulthood, what happens is how a person related to their parents during childhood is definitely a good indicator of how they relate to people in their adult relationships. And so what happens is it just really rolls over from childhood, those relationships there, and how you interacted with your parents and people there. It just spills over into adulthood, and you kind of mimic those same patterns that you saw in childhood, right? And so we're going to talk about how in your adult relationships, how each of those attachment styles may look. And so as we're talking about these, again, you don't feel bad if you see yourself in a certain category, because that's what we're talking about this today for, to bring you more clarity and help you become more self-aware. And so as we're talking about this and those characteristics, just listen to them and kind of see which category you feel you may fall into.
Yeah, and why as you're saying this, it just kind of like remain open. Remember, there's not one size fits all. So I mean, it is very possible that you may have had some attachments in your life that were more secure while others were more anxious. But the thing about this is just so that you can understand, especially if you're somebody that is watching this right now and you're like, I just don't understand why relationships are not working for me.
Yes.
Like, I don't understand there's a relationship I'm in. Maybe it's a romantic relationship. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's a co-working relationship. Right. And I cannot figure out why in the heck this relationship is either causing me a lot of stress or it's not working. And so this will hopefully give some awareness not only to you, but you might could even pinpoint if somebody has a different attachment style than you of the relationship that there may be conflict in right now. So
Mhm.
go ahead, Charlie, and tell us about kind of what these look like and how they look like in relationships in adulthood.
Yes. Okay. Let's dive in. So, a person with a secure attachment style. So, how does this look? How does this person look in relationships? So, they tend to have a positive view of themselves and others. So, essentially, that means that they have high self esteem. They probably have no issue trusting other people. They are comfortable expressing their emotions. They are direct in their communication. They have the ability to set boundaries, clear boundaries, and also to implement those boundaries, and also really respect the boundaries of other people as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
They're able to manage conflict well. They don't necessarily rely on the approval or affirmation from other people to feel secure. And they're really close being in relationships, but they're also okay with being alone as well. So, really, that person is just secure. They're secure with being in a relationship and secure with just being alone and by themselves.
Yeah, what an awesome place to be if you
Right.
and
Right.
insecure. And look, I feel like we all can develop skills that can move us more to this attachment style. But again, it's understanding how you attach in the world. And I know we're about to talk about the anxious, and I want to point something out. If you are somebody that has a secure attachment style and you do get in a relationship with someone that has a different attachment style than you, that's where it is good to be aware of what other people's attachment style is. Because if you're super trusting and then you're with somebody who is super avoidant, then that can start to create some conflict between of the trust that you normally give. And then I know I've talked with individuals before and they're like, well, I just want to believe the best about people and I want to trust them. And I'm like, yes, that is great. We don't want to lose that part of you. But it also is understanding that people also interact in relationships maybe differently than you. And
Right.
how can you set boundaries that feel really good for you? But let's move on to the next one. So then we have secure. So what about anxious?
Yes. So in the anxious or with the anxious attachment style in relationships, that person has a fear of rejection and abandonment. So that means that they tend to cling to other people in relationships and they hate being alone. They do not want to be alone. So that's why, if there's ever a threat of the other person leaving them or abandoning them, they are like, oh, no, do not leave me. They
Yeah.
are clinging. So this person has a difficulty regulating their emotions. They struggle to directly communicate their needs, and they heavily depend on other people for validation and for that approval. They're highly sensitive to criticism. They often display intense jealousy and distrust of the other person, and they have a hard time setting those boundaries. And also, they tend to put the needs of the other person before themselves. So they kind of put themselves on the back burner. And what you'll tend to see with this is that they want to become a people pleaser because they want to keep that environment safe so that the other person does not leave or abandon them, because that is like the worst thing ever for a person that has this anxious attachment style.
Yeah. And it is important to understand, like we were talking about, where this comes from, right? Like,
Right.
and it is because maybe there were situations in your life where people weren't predictable. And so the need for that predictability, and when
Mhm.
you feel that there's predictability, it helps you feel safe,
Right.
right? And so I think as we're talking about this, it also is bringing awareness to what are the things that don't make you feel safe and
Mhm.
why don't these things make you feel safe? And if you can kind of draw a linkage, it's not to play the blame game or to do anything like that. It's like, wow, okay, now that makes sense
Mhm.
as to why I feel like I need people around, or why I'm always giving at the expense of myself, or why I have a hard time saying what I need because I don't want people to be disappointed in me or disapprove me or really ultimately leave me. And
Right.
so I think it's important to understand like why are some of these drivers of behavior, because then you can understand really. And when we look at all of these attachment styles, I know what's going to come up is the truth is we all just want to feel safe and secure. But unfortunately, there might have been relationships in our life at early on that did not always make us feel safe and secure.
Right. Right. Exactly. So the next one that we are going to talk about is the avoidant attachment style. And remember, in childhood, the avoidant attachment style was formed because the parent just basically didn't meet the child's needs. So what happens then, because the parents didn't meet the child's like emotional needs, what happens is the avoidant person tends to suppress their emotions. It's just like, okay, those emotions then don't exist. Why? Because they weren't met in childhood. So they're used to ignoring their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And this person in relationships, they are going to be emotionally unavailable. They don't want to be close to other people. They avoid that closeness. They avoid commitment. And it doesn't mean that they don't want to be in relationships or aren't in relationships, but how you'll see this come up is that they prefer casual relationships, light relationships, because they tend to feel smothered in long-term relationships, or when other people get really close to them. They have a hard time trusting others, and essentially they feel like, I don't need anybody else. They're used to just fending for themselves and being alone because that's what they learned in childhood from their parents.
Well, and honestly, this attachment style, you really think about it, it helped them survive,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And I think a point as we're even looking at some of these is coming up for me is that, sometimes we develop these protective mechanisms within us to help us survive,
Yeah.
right? But sometimes it's a main awareness that those things aren't wrong. It was just a part of us that helped us get to a certain part in our life. But
Mhm.
that sometimes being aware of that can help us figure out, well, I don't like this. Like you said, I have an avoidant attachment style, but ultimately part of me does want a close relationship. I
Mhm.
just have no idea how to do that because
Right.
I didn't experience that. And for so long, I had to be in this survival mode, that this protective mode to help me get to where I'm at. And it served me till now, but maybe now it's not serving me. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit later of like how maybe even counseling can help with that. But um, sometimes when you encounter avoidant people that have avoidant attachment style, you may think, oh my gosh, they're so cold or
Mhm.
uncaring or like, you know what I mean? They're so detached.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that they're not a human too, and they don't want all of it, the same things that we all want as humans, like love and I think essentially attachment. It's
Mhm.
just because there hasn't maybe been somebody that has been stable and secure for a long enough period in their life that helps them see that maybe there is a different way. And maybe I can slowly start to break down this level of untrust that I've had in others because I almost had to have it. So,
Right. And I just want to add something there before we go on to the last one. We're talking about relationships and how those interact. If you, for instance, have someone that has an anxious attachment style where they are clinging, they want to be close. And if they are in a relationship with someone who is avoidant, then what happens if you pair those two people together, then the anxious person feels secure and they're like, okay, why aren't you calling me back? Where are you? Is he going to leave? Is she going to leave? Am I going to get rejected? Am I going to get abandoned? But then for the avoidant person, it's just too intense and
you're
too
like, it's too much.
right, right. And so the anxious person is like going full force, and then that causes the avoidant person to back, which then causes the anxious person. It's like a cycle.
It's a
It's like
cycle, yeah.
it's going both like back and forth with
I
each.
feel like as we're talking about this right now, if for the people that are watching, they're going to be like, "Oh, I know somebody who's in this cycle, or I've been in that cycle." So
Uh-huh.
the more that we're pointing this out, hopefully you can see yourself in some of these situations or some of these attachment styles, and start to get a little bit more of an understanding of how it engages. And honestly, the more you understand your attachment style, let's say that you're married and you are, as we're going through this, you're like, oh my gosh, that is my spouse,
Yeah.
then or that is my significant other, or that is my partner, then hopefully this helps you realize that, like, okay, what does this person need that may be something that I'm not always comfortable giving because it's not natural to me.
Right, right. Okay, so the last one is an anxious avoidant attachment style. And with this one, remember in childhood, their parents were probably not a safe place for them, whether it was abuse or maybe they were just gone, not there at all. So this person is just used to being hurt, right? And so they crave closeness, but they are afraid of being hurt. And so this is kind of like the anxious person and avoidant person in the same attachment style. So like the anxious one, they crave the intimacy, but then the avoidant one pulls back. This is like in the same person. They want that intimacy, they want that closeness, but then they also pull back because they're afraid of being hurt because they've been hurt so much in childhood and disappointed. And so this person worries that people in relationships in adulthood, the ones that are closest to them, they're afraid that they're going to hurt them or they're going to harm them in some kind of way. And so they don't trust other people. And what happens is they can't regulate their emotions. Sometimes they behave in completely unpredictable ways. And what happens is they almost sabotage the relationship before they end up getting hurt themselves. Mm-hmm. And about the anxious avoidant attachment style. And what's key with this person is that, you know, if we are talking about relationships, if you are in a relationship with a person who is anxious avoidant, it's almost like you have to constantly reassure them, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm here for you. And you really just have to be super patient with that person and almost, if you are the anxious avoidance style, learning to be patient with yourself as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And I think all of these styles that we're talking about, it is, how do I increase my understanding of myself, but how do I also be patient with myself as I learn to connect with people in different ways? And one of my favorite people to listen to, who is a relationship couples counselor, her name is Esther Perel. And she just talks about the fact that, you know, we don't come into this world always learning how to navigate relationships. Mm-hmm. Unless you've had a secure attachment, you necessarily haven't learned how to develop healthy relationships. And it's not because it's anybody's fault. It's just been because that's just what was your experience. Right. And, you know, they don't teach in school relationship skills 101. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy is this is what we do throughout our whole life. We're building relationships with people, whether that be, you know, like I said, in the workplace, in your family. And so sometimes it's learning these things that will help you take your relationships to another level. Because when you have more of an understanding of yourself, the more you can have an understanding of others. And then you can also learn things that will help you have healthier relationships. Right. So that maybe gets to my next question. Mm-hmm. And so how can maybe counseling help if you are struggling because I feel like most people come to this understanding of attachment styles when they are like struggling in a relationship. Right. Or there are these things that just do not, like, I've tried this so many times and the same thing keeps on happening to me. And like one thing I heard one time was like, if the same thing keeps on happening to you, you may be the common denominator. Mm-hmm. And that it's not meaning that it's something negative about you. It just means that it is a great opportunity then to look inward and say, how can I learn things differently, do things differently? Maybe I don't set boundaries and I let people walk all over me all the time. Mm-hmm. So it might bring an awareness of like, okay, I may need to start communicating what I need, but how can counseling help people understand these styles or even help in relationships?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So knowing your unique attachment style, and I feel like this is something that we have both kind of hinted at, throughout this, is that it helps you become more self-aware and not just like, okay, this is wrong with me. But it helps you to target those areas where you may need to develop new patterns in relationships. And it is possible to create a new attachment style and really build healthier, more long-term relationships. So, if you didn't have that secure attachment style in childhood, it doesn't mean that, you have to stay in the other insecure attachment styles. It just means that you can figure out which attachment style you fall into and maybe some things that you need to work on. So if it is setting boundaries, or if it is learning to trust more, or learning to regulate your emotions, or learning some communication skills, counseling can help you figure out those different areas that you need to target and work on. And working with a therapist, whether it's in individual counseling, if you just want to work on yourself, or if it's in couples counseling where both people are wanting to work on that relationship together, the therapist can help you learn different coping mechanisms. They can help you gain new skills. Maybe it's conflict resolution, or maybe communication skills that can help you improve your life, whether it's individually or improve your relationship, and really just help you just build healthier attachments and healthier relationships.
I feel like if somebody was watching up to this point, they probably just breathed a real big sigh of relief when you told them that it is possible to change your attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
And, first step of changing is understanding where you're starting at, right? Like you can't go a different direction if you don't know where you're at in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes understanding, hey, this is where I'm at. Here's some reasons why I may be at this place, but I really want to have better relationships.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Sharlette is saying is the good news is that it definitely is possible. Now, will it require some self-reflection? Yes. Will it require some awareness? Yes. Will it require some behavior change? Absolutely. But the first step is awareness, and then the second step is understanding. And then once you have that awareness and understanding, then you can start to learn new skills and new ways of engaging with people that can help you ultimately have healthier and happier relationships.
Right.
So with that being said, Sharlette, if you can, just tell a little bit about who you help here at Be Inspired Counseling and Consulting, who you like working with, and kind of how you even help people with understanding this attachment style and how they can have better relationships.
Right. Yeah. So here at Be Inspired, I do work with individuals, teenagers, adults, and I also work with couples as well. So if there are couples that are interested in getting married and want to have the conversation, I do offer premarital counseling, and I am a certified SYMBIS assessment facilitator, and that is just basically, the assessment is called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. So
wouldn't that be awesome, people? Save your marriage before it starts.
Yes. And so if you're out there and you're interested in getting married and you want to establish a good foundation for your marriage that will last a lifetime, you can come see me and we can have the conversation and help you figure out how you can build healthy patterns in your relationships.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
Now I was just going to say, what an awesome thing, because I think we don't always think about making the investment on our relationship before we get to that big level of commitment, which is marriage, right? And, I think that being able to kind of make sure that we're understanding of each other and on the same page and realizing how we each interact with the world can go a long way into really establishing a relationship. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't. Whatever.
Oh, fine. I was going to say the last thing is that even if you are already married and you're like, okay, well, we're already married and we're still struggling. We've been married, whether it's 5 years or 50 years, and we still have some things that we need to work on. It's never too late. You can always make your relationship healthier. And so our goal here, and my goal, in therapy when working with couples, is just to help you have those conversations, learn those skills, and get to a healthy place.
Yeah, and I will have to say, Sharlette actually showed me, because I wasn't really familiar with the SYMBIS assessment, And I kind of got to look at it and how it kind of presents itself and the way it helps you navigate conversations. And I was like, man, this is amazing. I wish that every relationship had this, like, forget about even waiting before you get to marriage, like have this in the beginning. Yeah, these conversations can really go a long way. So, well, thank you so much for being here today. We just want y'all to know that if you found this super helpful and you're like, wait, I know somebody who needs to know about their attachment style. It may be somebody that you're in a relationship with or a family member or whatever. Feel free to share this with them, because I think the more we are understanding of how we engage in the world, the better relationships we can have. And if you're saying, well, you know what, I think I might need to come in and talk to somebody, or maybe me and my significant other would really benefit from some counseling, premarital counseling, and you are interested in working with Sharlette, please hop over to our website, BeInspiredCC.com. Under our therapist, you can learn more about her and who she serves. But also, if you just are like, hey, I want to schedule something, give us a call at 318-266-7021. And just let us know what you're needing help with, and we will try to find the best help for you. So we thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this was helpful.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sharlette. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.